Hi everybody, this is Patty Toledo. We're back with Creative Rates with my super team of best hosts in the world, Charly and Sophia. Like I'm making the introduction bigger every day, so they are gonna be in the world domination. Today we have a great guest, Rosie and Sarah, here. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves properly, but we're going to be talking about something that I think not only is extremely important, I think we are not even close to tackle the problem, not even close to find the solution. So I think the discussion needs to carry on stronger than ever, which is mental health. But first of all, Rosie, Sarah, if you can be so kind of introducing yourselves and sharing to our viewers and listeners, the mic is yours.
Yeah, of course. So hi, everyone. My name is Rosie. I am the Content and Community Manager at Safe in Our World, which is a mental health charity for the games industry, alongside Sarah, who's our director, who's wonderful and can introduce herself as well. But yeah, huge fan of games and huge fan of talking about mental health. So I'm really happy to be here.
Hi, yes, as Rosie just introduced me, not much more to say. Yes, I run the charity here. Very pleased to be on the podcast chatting about this. You know, this is what Rosie and I do all day, every day, but it's not what people think about all day, every day. So, yeah, really happy to share our thoughts and views and, yeah, get stuck into a really good conversation. But thanks for inviting us.
Cool. Thank you, Charly, for bringing Rosie and Sarah. This is amazing. One thing I wanted, before we start in the discussion itself, would you be so kind in telling us a bit more about Safe in Our World and the work that you have been doing every day? I think a lot of people, they know there are projects and charities out there for support, but they don't know how to reach out. They don't know what is the work that is being done. I think it's important for people to know more about the work that you do every day.
Sure. Shall I go first? I'll just I'll tell you a little bit about what we do with the industry, because what we do is too focused. Half of it is focused at the industry, and then the other half is for gamers, for anybody who works in the industry, and I'll let Rosie pick up on that. But one of the main things we've been doing since we've been going since October 2019 is reaching out to the industry, anybody who works within the industry, to come together and really start taking seriously the mental health of their teams and their talent. We all know the industry hasn't always had the best reputation for looking after its teams, and we're here to really start that movement in changing that and making it a very much more welcoming and inclusive place. So we have a program called Level Up Mental Health, where we offer training, resources, consultation, all sorts of different things for any size of company within the industry, to really give them that first help, to get started on their journey if they haven't already. As I say, a lot of what we do is free of charge. We've done lots of training for community managers. We've done training for mental health first aid for underrepresented groups. We've got lots and lots going on for the industry. So I'll pass you over quickly, so I don't want to take up too much time, to Rosie for the other bits and pieces that we do.
Yeah, so a lot of what I do is more community focused and games focused, as kind of Sarah mentioned. I think a lot of what we see in our industry is born of passion, and that's the same for gamers as well. And essentially what we're trying to do here is use games as a way and a medium to talk about mental health in a more engaging way, in a way that people can relate to, in a not scary way, because a lot of the time people hear mental health, they're like, oh my God, I don't want a really serious conversation. And it does not have to be a serious conversation. And so that's a lot of the work that I do. We look at games that highlight mental health in a responsible way, that represent mental health in an accurate way. It's non-stigmatizing, and basically just kind of draw more people into the conversation about having this important discussion around mental health. So yeah, that's kind of the other side of what we do.
I will let the girls talk, but something you said, Rosie, triggered a question in my head, which is, do you think I believe there is still quite a lot of stigma in the games industry, especially with employers when it comes about mental health. Like for people, when they see the team saying about mental health issues or depression, there, like, am I right? Is it still this heavy stigma around people in the team that have burnout, and what is the impact of it for the company on the commercial point of view and business point of view?
I think it depends on, who you work, where you work and who you are and how you deal with it. But I do think in general, and not just in the games industry, that there is still a stigma around mental health. We still see people who are, scared or anxious to see the repercussions if they do speak out about having a bad experience, if they're not sure what to do, if they need extra support. Like even, reasonable accommodations within work are seen as like this really scary thing that you have to ask for, and it really doesn't need to be that way. And so I'm really starting to encourage more people to, if they feel comfortable, to start talking about that, because I think that's the key thing, is that if you're in a workplace where you don't feel comfortable to talk about these things, then that's also a huge responsibility on the workplace to be able to accommodate for that and make a culture that is safer to speak out. But it's not always the case, and that's kind of what we're here to do, is to try and help with that culture change of getting more people feeling safe to talk about their own experiences. And we constantly see horror stories of people leaving certain companies or leaving the industry in total, in as a whole, because of a terrible experience that they had, and it's really had serious implications on their mental health. And it really doesn't need to be that way. We just need to make sure that people are educated and enthusiastic about making that change as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It is okay to say you're not okay. You don't have to always go, "How are you? I'm fine." Sometimes that is an opening to actually discuss, and we need to make that environment safer, to make that step, to make it okay to not be okay, because we can't be good all the time.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think a lot of that does come down to training the leads, the managers, the directors, so that it comes from the top down. One of the things I always talk about is, we'll go into the office and we'll say that we twisted our ankle when we were gardening, but we won't go in and say that we've been up all night with crippling anxiety. But that's for the leaders in the organisations to make sure they are educated and trained and know how to spot signs that people might be suffering. And like Charly said, just have that conversation, open that conversation up so that there isn't a stigma around that, and that you can feel happy to be able to share that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything everyone said. I also think that it maybe controversially, but it comes from a wider issue of, well, twofold. Is one, there's this idea in the games industry that you're lucky to be in the games industry and you have to always be happy and content, even when it's terrible working conditions, terrible pay, a range of different things. And there's this attitude that you've just got to be happy with that because it's games, so it's got to be amazing. It's your fault. It's not the employer's fault. It's not the industry's fault. It's your fault for not enjoying something that's so amazing. So I think that's one of the parts. I think, honestly, one of the other parts is it sort of ties in a bit, but there's just this sort of general underlying attitude that, again, because you work in games, you should be willing to give up everything for it. This idea that, don't whinge about crunch. Don't whinge about the fact that, I don't know, maybe you work at home and you're getting emails at 1 a.m. in the morning and it's like, you should be doing, people don't like the whole clock off at 6 o'clock, even, because you're working at home. It's like, well, you've got your phone. Why aren't you replying? And so I do think there needs to be this sort of greater appreciation within the industry that, no matter how much we're lucky or we enjoy it or we don't, work is work. And you also have to have a life outside of work. It has to exist. You have to be able to say, I need my time now. I've done your time. Now it's my time to rewind and relax, do those sorts of things. So yeah, I completely agree with everything. And I think there's also just, there should be a level of, I do think that it's probably similar for a lot of creative industries, that there's a very poor divide between work-life balance, very, very poor divide. And I think that has such a damaging effect on mental health as someone who's experienced it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I totally agree. And I think it's like, oh, sorry, you go, Charly.
No, go you on.
Okay. I was just going to say, I totally agree. I think we see it quite a lot where people have got their dream job, for example, and you've made it, therefore you need to put absolutely everything into it. Your whole life becomes your job. You can't have your own time anymore. And that's obviously not the case. Like, I think however fun your job may be, it is still a job, and you are more than your job, and you need to be able to have a life outside of your job, like you say. And I think it is a wider issue in a lot of creative industries, because people prey on their passion to say, well, hey, you're working on a game that you've played when you were younger, for example. Like, you've somehow managed to get this job. You're incredibly lucky to be here. You're not. You actually got the job. You applied for it. You have the skills. Like, you're not there because you're lucky. You're there because you can do the job.
Mm-hmm.
But people will use that against you to be able to have more not creativity, more oh my god, I can't think of the word, where you work more, basically. Productivity, there we go. You have more productivity out of you because you feel like you should be doing it, and you do it out of guilt. And obviously that should never be the case, and hopefully we're going to start seeing that more in I think that is a lot of the responsibility falls to managerial when it comes to that, because they need to be the ones to say, stop working. Like, Sarah and I talk about this quite a lot, and she will be one of the first people to be like, hey, why are you emailing? It's past your working hours, like, stop. And I'll be like, oh, sorry, I was just doing these things. She was like, well, all right, we'll come into work like 15 minutes later tomorrow, but like, please stop working. And I think that's so important to hear that from someone with authority as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the industry, it's not productive, is it? You can crunch for a couple of months, and all you're doing is burning your team out. A lot of them will probably leave because of it. They're not getting paid for the extra hours, and then you're going to have to spend money re-recruiting and retraining. It really is about time the industry properly woke up and realised that looking after your team is actually better for your bottom line as well. You get better productivity. No one does their best work when they've worked 23 out of 24 hours. So yeah, it really should be something of the past, but unfortunately, like Patty said, I think we've got a long way to go on that.
I find it funny as well, and I have seen this in the industry, even if people go like, no, it doesn't have. I have seen this. There is a lot of gaslighting and generational talk to justify things. I have seen managers and directors going and saying, oh, no, when I started working, we would work like these kids don't know what they're doing. Like this new generation, it's all about the working less, and they are so lazy. And or if you crunch and say like, oh no, it's you don't have the energy. Like I have seen so much of this gaslighting and generational talk to justify a behavior that is not right. Like, and I do understand where it comes from, because, well, it is true. When I started working in creative industry, there wasn't a talk about mental health, and people used us as oranges, like literally take all of the juice out and then throw away, get the next one. And that was the practice. Like, you telling that you had depression was like, it wasn't unheard of. And in certain countries, is it still unheard of? There are several countries around the world where if you go and say, I need a day off because I'm depressed, or I need time off because I'm depressed, that's like, no, when you're back, your job is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they won't fire you at that time, but they will fire you when you're back. But I think it's what you guys said is exactly that. Is we need to change the mindset from the top down, because otherwise it becomes this constantly line of gaslighting from no, is the young people that don't know how to do it. We were made of a different cloth at our time, and it's not that. Is because you had to adapt yourself to that situation doesn't make that situation right. You just adapted because it was survival, right?
I think like following on with that, I think one of the things that has to be appreciated on the effect on people's mental health is the fact that the games industry and I know a lot of other creative industries do this as well, is they sort of, in my opinion, exploit the contractor nature of work. there's becoming fewer and fewer permanent roles within the games industry. It's an awful lot of either it's a contract as in a short-term project, or largely it's just, no, you're a contractor for this company. And it sounds fairly innocuous and innocent, but actually what it does is, in my opinion, is it creates this system where no one actually feels secure. So when that email comes through at 7 p.m., you feel like you've got to reply to it because you're fairly easily disposable. You know, if they've had enough of you, there's no sort of employer's rights. There's none of that. It's bye-bye, we'll get someone else in to do your job, you know. And it happens with monotonous regularity in the industry. Don't want to crunch, bye-bye, you know. And I think there needs to be, and this also, but then this works both ways, which is something that, you know, the employer doesn't often get. They talk about people being lazy, but, you know, you're offering barely anything to your employer. So why are you whinging that you're getting, you know, like, I found a new job, bye-bye. Well, that's the nature of the game, you know. It's, I think the point I'm trying to make, which leads on from Patty, is I feel like there needs to be more of a commitment to staff, more of a commitment that we want to bring you into the team, we're going to offer you security, and we want to grow you. So another thing that's barely ever offered these days, training. We're going to train you to do this role. You'll work with someone higher up. You know, if there's one pet peeve I have in the job market and in terms of mental health and all that sort of stuff, it's the hit the ground running. I hate the phrase. I absolutely hate it, because I feel like even if you're a veteran, you still need some support to ease into a new company, learn the culture, learn what are the you know, what are past achievements, what we want to gain. And I think that all taps into the mental health aspect of feeling like you're safe, secure, wanted, and have a future in a place that you can commit to. And then if you feel safe and secure, it's not just that you'll feel comfortable saying, oh, it's 6 o'clock, I'm going to clock off now and go and, I don't know, watch a movie. But if you stay at the company, when you are then in a position of responsibility, you'll feel comfortable saying that to your staff, because that's what you've learned. So it's like, okay, no, we're done now. It's 6:30. We've done a bit extra. Go home, go. You know? So I think there needs to be this entire culture shift in the workforce as to how we work in the industry.
I agree. I have a question for you guys related to that, is because Sophia brought something that I think important on, is like, usually people take mental health as a personal thing. So you're anxious personally or you're depressed personally. They don't necessarily connect the work environment to the mental health issue that the person has. And if the pandemic shifted something, is there's more acceptability and openness to remote working and working from anywhere. And I think something Sophia said is really key, that it is for some people working remotely and being a contractor, it's a great thing. For other people, that's a source of mental instability and anxiety and other things. So my question would be, what is your advice for companies, especially if they want to go to a remote setting, for them to create this stability and this safety environment that it's important to have? Because I think a lot of companies will have problem with that, like how to balance flexibility and freedom and the mental health and security that people need to have.
I think this kind of comes off the back of what Sophia was saying, and that loyalty is a two-way street, and you need to be able to invest in your staff before they invest in you as well. Like, it needs to be both ways. And ultimately, if you treat people as people first, rather than, you know, a number, an employee, we fit you around the policy instead of fitting the policy around you. Like, I think that is a huge part in allowing people to feel as though they are actually valued and they are worth something in your company. Because everyone is going to have a different, you know, set of rules and circumstances that make them feel more comfortable at work. And if you actually start talking to them about what they would need to feel comfortable, what makes them feel safe at work, what makes them feel productive, actually just having a conversation with them about that and seeing how it fits in with your day-to-day, like, that's a great start, because at least you're then listening to what they have to say instead of just assuming that this is what they need and this is what works best for everyone else. So for example, like we have started doing a few things. We have walking meetings now, which is I love. You don't have to go on a walk, but you can if you want to. So like we'll just like plug our headphones in and just do our meeting whilst we're on the go. I love it so much. You don't have to do it, especially if it's raining and gross and you don't want to go outside. We have more flexible working hours. So if you actually are more productive in the day, like, so I often have these hyper focus moments where I will want to work for like 5 hours straight and just power through, get on. I feel really good about it. And as long as Sarah is happy with me to do that, I will then take my hours back another day when I'm feeling less motivated to do something like that. And just being able to have this open conversation about what you consider healthy for you and what makes you feel valued and secure, then like I said, it's a great place to start.
Well, how about you, Sorrell? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think going from office to working remote has been a huge shock for a lot of companies. I don't think they were really set up for it. And I think after not that after the pandemic, or not after it, but now things are more stable. I think a lot of companies have had to get their head around it, because now it's what the team want. And I think you need to have that trust in your team. So that comes back to what Rosie was saying. If Rosie's been flying through a project for 5 hours, then finish, go and do something else. But I trust Rosie to do that, and you have to believe in and trust in your team that they're not just going to sit and watch Netflix all day, that they are going to do their work. And that's how remote working is for me. You invest in your team, you believe in your team. And I think it is just that dialogue. I mean, on the back of that, it is harder to manage a remote team. You do have to make sure you talk every day. You do have to make sure that, people have got their cameras on from time to time. A lot of us do work alone at home. So, it does come with challenges, but I also think it's the way forward. It really is. This is how it's going to be now. So as long as, as a manager, as a leader, you talk to your team, you find out what works for them, and you find that happy medium. Don't be stuck on 9 to 5. No one wants to work 9 to 5. You might have children to pick up. You might have all sorts of things. But you invest that time and, that effort into your team, then you are going to get it back and some.
Yeah, trust is a huge part of that. I'm really glad you brought that up, because I feel like that is a massive part. If I don't feel trusted at work, then I'm much less likely to want to really excel and do my best, because I don't feel like I'm a person. Do you know what I mean?
No, micromanaging is the worst. There's no worse feeling than being micromanaged, because you do just feel like you're being completely untrusted to do anything. So yeah, I think also there's I have to bring sex into this. I'm sorry, ladies, to shock you all, but as females, I've worked in an office where I've been less likely to say that I'm not doing okay, because that stigma of being, oh, you're female, you're over emotional, or it's your time of the month, that kind of thing can actually really hold you back, where you want to try and be harder, you want to try and be stronger and not overly emotional, or all these other kind of throwaway terms that are used to gaslight or take the power away from our own mental health struggles. And so that's something that I feel needs to be addressed within the workplace as well.
Yeah, I agree.
And one thing I'd say is, first of all, apologies for the rogue phone call, but that is the nature of working on a computer, recording on a computer. I think one of the things that also needs to be appreciated from a mental health point of view is that, I think it's just something touching upon, what we were talking about earlier. And I just think about me personally, but it also taps into that work culture. And I think there's things that people have to do as individuals. And I actually think there's things that companies can do. I know quite a few that do this sort of thing to help, is that there's this notion at the moment in games that obviously work from home is what everyone wants, but it's not always what everyone wants. Personally, I've worked remote for about 8 years. I can honestly say I've never really enjoyed it. I don't like. I don't necessarily want to be in an office all the time. I think for me, hybrid is the perfect blend where sometimes you're with the team, sometimes you've got your own space. I definitely need my own space. But where I'm going with this is, we're humans, and some people need more human interaction than others from time to time. So I think part of that is, if all you're doing is work, it can become a very isolated life, especially if you don't have a partner or a family milling about the house all the time. But I also think that there's things that companies can do. I spoke to a company a couple of weeks ago, and they every Friday just have like a team get together digitally but it's not work. It's just, let's have a chat. There's things that I've worked in companies in the past where it'd be like, okay, it's online games night and they've got a private server and everyone's jumping on and having a good time, playing a game. So I think there's a lot of things that obviously you can do, but you need the safety and the security in order to be able to do those things. But I think there's a lot of things that companies can do. I mean, obviously you don't want to make them mandatory. Some people are introverted and they love their own time. Great. All it is respect. You respect that. But equally, if you've got someone on your team who's now working remote and really struggles with it, I mean, I'm used to it. I've done it for a long time. But you might have some people who this is their new normal. They really aren't geared to be remote workers yet. So there can be things you can do by encouraging, digital meetups, or, setting up clans games, or it's movie night on, I don't know, Disney. They let you do that thing where you can watch them all at the same time, So I think there's things that companies can do in that regard as after hours. And the good thing about that is, if you set up an after hours event, everyone's got to stop working, whether they want to join the after hours event or not, because this event, and even if you're not included, surely no one's working because this. So that's just a little thing, but I think that breeds into like this culture of respect in the staff, and like you say, Rosie, before, it's like listening to your staff. What do they need? What do because it's not a novel idea. It's existed since the start of this work culture. But if you look after your staff, it only benefits you. I've never understood this idea that like ignoring your staff's needs, because if you look after your staff, you're going to get more productivity. We saw that recently in the trials over 4-day working weeks, that people were just as productive but worked less. So by same analysis, treating your staff better, the worst case scenario is nothing changes. But, we can all guarantee you it will change, because at least they'll feel happier and they'll be more loyal. They'll want to stay with your company. They'll want to grow. So, I think there's things as we approach a new normal, to use the quote, that companies not just can do, but probably should be looking into, encouraging people not to be working all the time, so that they can, do the things that maybe get out the house if that's what they want to do. Or if they want to stay in the house, they can get online, play a game, read a book, play a movie. And equally, companies can help facilitate that, because if you've got someone new who's never worked remote before and now works remote, they may struggle to work out how to connect with their colleagues and these sorts of things. So I think there's lots that companies can have to do, rather than begrudgingly stepping their way into the new normal. There's things that they can do to help facilitate it properly.
I agree. Sorry, I'll just say really quickly. One of the things that I love is leave loudly. Have a leave loudly policy, and for managers, I'm leaving at 4 today. You don't even have to give a reason why. Just say I'm done for today. I'm leaving. Make sure you take your holiday. Everybody needs holiday. You need time off. You don't need to go. You don't need to go to a beach in Spain. Just take time off. Play games. Do whatever works for you. But just make sure that there is that policy that people from the top down are being seen to take time off. And just the other quick thing was, there's a Deloitte study, it just reminded me of it, that every £1 spent on mental health support for your team, you get 5 back in productivity. It speaks for itself. Anyway, sorry, Rosie.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I did a studio visit last week or the other week. I can't remember when it was. Time is just a concept at this point. But regardless, they had a new policy that they'd put in place. This is Radical Forge, and they're in Middlesbrough. And I don't know if they invented it or if they just took it on, but it was called First Friday. And essentially the first Friday of every month, they have a day. They have that Friday to basically spend the time that they would be at work doing something that makes them feel good. And that can be something that is, more self-care related. It can be working on your own projects. A lot of people who work in this industry are also involved in multiple different projects. And it allowed every member of staff to kind of do something that they felt good. So I went in on that first Friday and I saw people crocheting and doing like their own art projects, working on their own stuff. Like some were just playing games, some were having fun, but like it was really nice to see that sense of community and seeing what everyone else is up to, and having a dedicated time and space for that. Because often if you don't have I think Sophia, you were saying, if you don't have a dedicated space for that, it's not going to happen because people don't feel like they can actually do it because it's just a concept, isn't it? Like it's like having, I don't know, like having mental health days for me, or like duvet days or whatever you want to call them. I rarely take them because I don't, if I don't see other people taking them, I don't feel like I can actually do it myself. Or like, when you're at work and someone says, oh, everyone leaves at 4, but the manager doesn't leave at 4, then you feel like, can I actually leave at 4? Is that just something that we say to be polite and make people feel good? Like, what's the actual deal here? So yeah, is it a trap? And I hate that so much. So I really love seeing like new creative ideas and from studios as well to embrace like different levels of their employees' life and not just work.
I hate the term duvet day. I think that makes it sound like I'm going to be really lazy today and I can't be bothered to get out of my bed, rather than I've actually got depression and I can't get up today. And I think that's why I won't have duvet days. Mental health is the same as physical health. If you're not well, you're not well, you're not working.
It's a sick day.
Yeah, I hate that term duvet day.
Yeah. I mean,
when people are working from home, and I know as someone who's worked remotely for quite a long time as well, you tend to work longer hours just because you're feeling like I've got to really show that I'm working, even though, and so some of my work's based in America, so I'm working almost double hours, which I'm fine with. But does this bring into connection crunch? Like if you've got people who are every day working overtime because they're working from home and they want to show their value, show their worth, is that crunch? And how can you deal with that when it's someone working from home? And is crunch as bad as everyone says? Or, I mean, obviously it is, but what's your take on that, sort of Rosie and Sarah?
Do you want to go?
Oh, no, you go. I don't mind. I can go.
Okay, yeah. I think this kind of relates a little bit back to the point I had before about people's personal working patterns and what makes them feel productive. Because personally for me, if I have to sit down and work for 3 hours, then I take an hour lunch break, and then I do this, and then I do that, it doesn't work for me. I often take, and Sarah knows this from experience, I often take my lunch hour at 5 o'clock, and then I have 5 till 6, because I usually work 9:30 till 6. I will just work through the day and then finish at 5 and be able to switch off, because if I have an hour in the middle of the day where I'm meant to be just doing absolutely nothing, and it's a full hour, I take breaks for the record, but a full hour dedicated to doing nothing, I find it so difficult to be able to get back into that space of feeling productive. And then I feel worse about myself because I feel like I've wasted a day of doing nothing and I'm not being a good employee. So I think, again, it comes down to having that conversation about personal workloads, what the reasons why you're doing it. If you're doing it because you're doing it out of guilt, that's something that needs to be talked about, and that is a culture change that needs to happen from the top. If you're doing it because that is the way that you work and this is how you work best, then maybe a discussion around making sure that when you are not working, you're fully switched off, you're taking your hours back, and you're not overdoing it. And I think it also links into a cycle of overworking, because a lot of the time people come in and they overwork and they think, well, it doesn't matter because I'm happy to do it. It's my choice. I'm fine with it. But when they leave, that workload is then expected of the next person. And if they are not happy with overworking and doing double hours, then they will be looked at and seen as less productive or less worthy of their job. But obviously that's not the case. So whatever you choose to do, I think making sure that you're being open and honest about the hours that you're doing and the work that you're spending time on with your manager is key, because you can't expect the same productivity from everyone every day. That's my take on it.
I agree. To me, it's about setting your personal boundaries and checking in with yourself as to what those boundaries are. And also, it's really important to chat to your employer, your manager, whoever, to understand their expectations as well. And the two need to meet for a harmonious working relationship. And I think, again, that is another fault of managers sometimes, by not setting out those expectations as this is what we're looking for you to achieve over this period of time. So you're working double, thinking that you're not getting where you need to be, but in actual fact, if you had that conversation, you may have been well on target to be reaching that. But I think it is that lack of communication, that lack of conversation sometimes, and working remotely doesn't help that, because if you're all in an office together, you can pretty much see where people are, what they're doing on various projects and where they're at. Working remotely, we all work in a silo, don't we? We don't exactly know what everybody else is doing. So I think those two things are really quite important, when it comes to this whole area.
Yeah, I wanted to add something, then I have a last question, because we already exploded time. It's half an hour goes so fast. One thing I wanted to say is I agree with everything, and just wanted to add, it's also we talk about kindness a lot in this podcast, and I think that's it. That's also a personal kindness, is understanding that some days you will be super productive and you will work over time because you're in the zone and you're doing it, and the flow is there, and it might be that the next day you're not able to do that anymore, and you will work half of the time, and the other half, instead of crunching yourself and really be upset because you're not having the same level of productivity every day, is understanding that we are not machines, and some days we're going to be super productive, other days we're not going to be as productive, and it's fine. And I think it goes back to what Sarah said, that is, if you know the targets and you know what you're doing, it gives you this flexibility and this chance of being kind to yourself, to knowing, I'm way on target. I don't need to kill myself today because I didn't do the same thing as yesterday, and I can build on to that and have these off days as well, as much as needed. But as we are in the, I wanted to ask one last favor from everybody. Like, I think it would be interesting. Do you have practical advice, like one practical advice that you would give people that want to start really working on mental health for their team? Something that is simple and that they can do right away, and maybe they are not thinking about. I know this is not the easiest thing, but if you have something, please share. And then this will be a great way for us to finish this.
So, I think there's two. One is what employers can do, and I think one is what people can do. I didn't mention at the start that my original degree is psychology, so this sort of stuff is very close to me. I've studied it, but at the same time, it's very hard. I've suffered from burnout. I suffered from anxiety, so it is very hard. So my advice to individuals, not to companies, would be, it may not work, but something I've found is find like one hobby that you enjoy, and don't multitask while you're doing it. Take a bit of time. If that's reading, reading's great because you're reading exclusively. If it's playing a game, do that. If it's, knitting, do that. Find one thing and carve out time, regular time in the week, to be like, this is the time where I do this little hobby and nothing else. And by that, because this is the trap I fall into, not, and I'm watching TV while I'm doing it. Not, I'm doing this while I'm, no, turn off the phones and just take an hour out and just do something that you love. Now, as for companies, it's kind of what I alluded to before. I think if we're looking for fast, cheap, because companies love cheap, and easy, it's just have get-togethers, whether they're, if you work in an office, whether it's, like every Friday we finish work an hour and a half early and we play games for that time or something, or we put on a movie. We used to do that when I worked at Chilingo years ago. We used to have that, and it was great for team building and morale. And you can achieve the same thing digitally. Create a clan on a game, everything's got a digital version these days, digital board games, just get everyone together and just, do a Disney watch movie party, whatever it is. I think that's a really cheap, easy and fast way to implement something mental health related for the team.
Nice one.
I think for me, it's for companies, train your staff. Everyone should be trained in mental health, whether they suffer from it or not. And it's a very, it costs money, yes, but it is incredibly effective in allowing a shared sense of empathy and also an awareness of resources and support that you have within the company already or externally as well. For people, mine's quite similar to yours, Sophia, in that mine is when you're doing something, when you work in a field that you're already passionate about, it is very easy to then make everything that you do relating to that subject about work.
Mhm.
So I'll be playing a game and be like, oh, this would be really good for the website. And I'm like, yes, but I don't need to think about that right now. I can just enjoy the game. And then when it's work time, I can think about what I want to do for that. And so having something that is just yours and that is, you make sure to not relate it to work. Like I see it with streamers a lot where they have a game that they don't stream because they know that even though it would make great content, they need something for themselves. And having that, I think, is really important as well. So yeah, finding something that you can do to like actually switch off from work and not relate it to it is really important.
For me, for employers, I would just say just try and start a conversation about mental health. If you've had any kind of struggles yourself, talk about them. Just try and reduce that stigma around mental health in whatever way you can, and it doesn't have to be expensive. It can just be, I don't know, sharing some podcasts about mental health. It can just be having that Friday chat, just, how are we all doing this week? Highs and lows, peaks and troughs, just that general conversation, and try and drop mental health in, just so that people know that if they are struggling, that you're the kind of person that they can come to and talk to about it. So whatever that is, just try and start the conversation, or if it's already been started, continue the conversation. And for an individual, one thing that I've started doing, and Rosie will laugh because it's quite a new thing for me, but I have been walking. I've been trying to get some walking exercise in every day. I bought myself a Fitbit, and now I am a slave to it. But it has really helped me to just set myself a goal of how many steps I want to do and make myself go out and do it. And I feel so much more productive by having walked away. I often listen to a podcast. Sometimes it's work related, but sometimes it isn't, something completely different. And I found that really helpful to me.
So when lockdown first happened, our company, the company before the company I'm working for now, we have a Discord, and every day people used to just check in and say hi, good morning. And if people were not checking in just to say hi or good morning, the management would then contact them. Hey, how are you doing? Something as simple as that. It's a sign if for 2 days someone hasn't said hello in the morning. And then we'd also do kind of like random coffee chats, online coffee chats. You'd be almost like speed dating, just given a random member of staff, and you'd have a discussion with them. It could be about work, could be about anything. And that was really nice. So things like that cost nothing, that are showing value to your staff, showing that you're actually paying attention to your staff, I think are really, really important. And for the personal advice, I would say, obviously be kind to yourself, but listen to yourself. If you wake up and something's not right, don't always try and power through. Listen to yourself. Why isn't it right? Have a think about that. And then potentially, if you're able to, talk to someone about it. And particularly if it's a consistent situation, then definitely talk to someone about it. And like I said, it's always okay to not be okay.
This is a great way to finish. Thank you. And I don't have, I agree with everybody, but I would say the only thing I would like to add is, remember, you're not alone.
Mhm.
Mental health is not something that, oh, I'm depressed, I'm sick, I'm the problem. No, you're not. Everybody has down times, sometimes more serious than others. Everybody has anxiety, sometimes more serious than others. But it doesn't matter what is the level that you have, and if you need to take medication, if you need professional help, it doesn't matter. You're not alone. We are all in the same boat. And I think for a lot of people, the feeling of not being the only person in the world that has that problem helps a lot, because I think a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves because they think they are the problem. You're not the problem. Like it is normal, and we're here to help. I think not necessarily only us five, but like your co-workers are there in the same boat with you, and I think my suggestion for employers is be human. Make yourself human. Show to your co-workers and your employees that you are human, you understand, and make yourself approachable as much as possible, because that's a great great point to start that conversation, and to bring things to a nice way. Make yourself as approachable as possible. But ladies, thank you very much. This was awesome and lovely. And I kind of feel that we could be on this conversation for hours and hours. And maybe we should go back and touch point at some point to see how things are going. You're always welcome to come back. But thank you very much for today. And we see you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.